Hi everyone, I'm Lori with Behavior Education at Spirit Keeper Equine Sanctuary. Welcome to this miniature class where I'm going to talk about how to get shy snakes used to living with you or used to living with you and your family in a human household. I get asked all the time, how can I work with my shy snakes so that they don't hide all the time? I never see them. Or what can I do with my shy snake to get them to stay out when I come in the room? So people are having issues with certain snakes hiding when they come in the room or just hiding all the time and they never get to see their snake. As with anything, there's more than one way to do something. So here are some options for getting shy snakes used to you or used to living with you and your family. The first one is just through passive habituation, and I've talked about this in another video where I featured our Sonoran gopher snake Neutron, so feel free to look that up on the channel. And then there are several ways to actively habituate snakes who are shy. One of those is through gradual desensitization. Another way is through choice-based handling. Both of those things are obviously related to one another. You can actively habituate shy snakes through target training and through puzzle feeding. What we are specifically talking about in this video today is how to use target training to habituate a shy snake. Here are the first steps to target training a shy snake. First, you're going to just take the target and place it inside the enclosure, allowing the snake to passively habituate to the target on their own. So if this is my target, I'm simply going to set it in the enclosure and I'm going to leave it there. I might leave it there overnight. I might leave it there for several days. I might leave it there for a week. I'm basically going to leave the target in the enclosure with the snake until the snake's not afraid of it, until the snake is not paying any attention to it, or until the snake is sitting on it, tongue flicking at it, moving over it. Just basically now it's another piece of enclosure furnishing that the snake sees as a neutral stimulus or as something interesting to investigate, but they're not afraid of it. You're not going to flood the snake with this, forcing it on the snake. I have a video that I'm going to show you as to where I placed it in an enclosure, but you can just place it somewhere in the enclosure where it's sort of out of the way and where if the snake is afraid of it, it's not going to prevent your snake from getting to resources like their hides or their water or climbing accessories or burrowing. You're just going to set it sort of off to the side somewhere in the enclosure where the snake can choose to interact with it or not. The next thing that you're going to do once the snake is used to that target being in the enclosure is then you're going to place the target inside the enclosure just at feeding time and only at feeding time. So you're no longer leaving the target in the enclosure all the time. Now you are just going to put the target in the enclosure at feeding time and you're going to set food on the target. So if this is my food, I'm going to put it on the target and I'm going to set this in the enclosure. And I'm going to leave it there for the snake to eat, whether they do it while I'm there or whether I leave the room and let them eat the food while I'm gone or I leave it overnight. But I'm going to pair the food with the target and I'm going to put it in the snake's enclosure at feeding time. So that's your next step. Once the snake will approach the target and eat it with you present. So in other words, you might start out putting this in the snake's enclosure and leaving the room or leaving it overnight. And you want to work up to where you can put the target paired with food in the enclosure and the snake will come out and take the food and eat it with you there, with you nearby, with you present in the room. So once that's happening, then you can move on to the next approximations or the next steps in your shaping plan, because we're trying to shape a specific behavior here by doing these little baby steps along the way. So then number 3 is you're going to place the target inside the enclosure first without any food on it. And when you see that the snake notices the target is in the enclosure, either by looking at it, tongue flicking at it, moving towards it, they do something to acknowledge the target's there, then you're going to place the food on it with tongs. And you can leave the room, you can step back, you can walk away, wherever your snake is at as far as their comfort level with you being present, then that's what you can do. But again, you're going to put the target in as soon as the snake notices and acknowledges the target in some way, then you're going to put the food on the target and let the snake eat it. Now, hopefully you can eventually work up to the point where you're placing the food on the target with the tongs and you're just waiting there for the snake to come get it. But you're going to have to work up to that because Not only are you pairing the target with food to get the snake to associate the target with food, you're also getting the snake used to your presence and no longer seeing you as a potential threat. Ideally, the snake will get to the point where it will emerge from hiding and eat with you present. The next goal is for the snake to notice the target, approach it, take the food from the tongs as you place it down and hold it there on the target. And once the snake is doing that, then you can move on to the next steps. So the next step, once you are able to place the target in the enclosure, place the food on it with tongs, and have the snake come and take it from your tongs, is to present the target to the snake on a stick or a pole. So you can then put the target on something that you can show the snake, and then the snake should approach the target. And once the snake has looked at the target, approached the target, tongue looked at it, touched it, acknowledged it in some way while you're holding it on the stick, then you're going to present the food to the snake in front of the target on tongs, and hopefully they take it. So that's your next step. And then once the snake is approaching the target, when it's presented on the stick or the pole and taking the food reinforcer from the tongs, from you as the handler, then you can proceed with target training just normally with all of the next steps, with all of the things that you've seen me do in other videos and all of those step-by-step approximations that you do to get the snake to follow the target, shift out of their enclosure, come out of hiding, station on a scale, station on something else, recall from an area that you don't want them in. In other words, these are the steps that you're going to go through with a very, very shy snake to get the snake to the point where now you can start using that target as a tool to get other behaviors from your snake. In conclusion, if target training doesn't seem to be working well with a particular shy snake, so if the steps just aren't progressing, and remember that these approximations will progress differently with each individual snake, because not all animals are going to progress at the same speed. So you might progress very quickly with one shy snake where you're able to do these different steps in just a few sessions. And you might have other shy snakes where you stay stuck on the same approximation or in the same step for many, many, many sessions before they're ready to move on. So you have to be patient and you have to work at the animal's pace. But if it just seems like the target training method isn't working, there are other ways that you can work with your particular shy snake to draw them out of hiding and start building their confidence around people. And one of those is puzzle feeding. I find that that has worked extremely well with some of the snakes that haven't really acclimated well to target training. So I'll have to do another video about that. But I want to make sure that you know there is a video following this PowerPoint. It's of our Escalapian snake going through the different approximations that I just talked about. And then at the end of the video, it shows our leopard boa, who was also a very, very shy snake, but who is a little bit further along than the Escalapian snake, and what you can accomplish with the target training, because both of these snakes featured in this video that's to follow hid all the time. I never saw them. If they were out, they would hide when I came in the room, and now they're both doing very, very well. I am also going to include a link to the 10 laws of modern shaping, which will help guide you in your shaping plan. In other words, it's just some things to keep in mind as you're moving along these different training steps with your snake. So I'll include that in the link on YouTube, as well as I will put a link at the end of the video. If you need to contact me with any additional questions, or if you find yourself having to troubleshoot and you want to run some ideas by me, I'm happy to talk with you or correspond with you through social media on Facebook, Instagram, or YouTube. And then you can also email me at behavioreducationllc@gmail.com. And you can contact me, as always, through my website at behavioreducation.org. So thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoy the following video.
The very first thing you want to do is just choose a target and then place it in the enclosure for the snake to passively habituate to it. Here I've chosen to put it on top of a hide so that in case the snake is afraid of it, it doesn't interfere with him getting to any of his resources. The next step is to place the target in the enclosure only at feeding time. So I've made a spot in front of his hide for the target where I'm going to place it in an area where I'm sure he's going to see it at the time I place it in. Now, this presumes that he's already habituated to the target, that he's not afraid of it. He doesn't see it as anything aversive. He's already had several days or as long as he has needed to habituate to that target and see it as a neutral stimulus or something he's curious about prior to getting to this step. So I am now going to leave the target in the enclosure with the food on it. And I might leave the room and leave it this way overnight, or leave it for the day, or come back after a few minutes and check to see if he's taken the food. I'm going to feed him this way several times, pairing the food directly with the target until I am sure that he's used to eating this way and that he's starting to associate the food item with the target disc. I like to set up surveillance so that I can see if the snake is interacting with the target and how long it takes him to come out and get the food. Now, eventually you want the snake to do this while you're in the room. So this footage was filmed while I was in the room with Eleanor, and I was able to leave the door open and actually watch him interact with the target disc and the food until he takes the food off the disc into his hide with him. Once we're at this point, then you can move on to the next step. Once you're at the point where he understands that the food is paired with the target and that he's coming out of his hide when he sees the target disc and that he's taking the food off of it with you present as he interacts with the target disc and the food, then the next step is to go ahead and put the disc in before you place the food. So you don't pair it directly anymore. You put the disc in, wait for the snake to notice it, and then place the food on the disc with tongs, and then leave the area, and hopefully work up to the point where you can place the food on the disc with tongs and stay right there, and the snake will come out and take the food from the tongs on the disc. And that's the next thing that you're going to see in the video. During this approximation, I'm now placing the target disc in the enclosure where I know Eleanor can see it, and I'm not pairing it directly with food immediately. So I've placed the target disc in his enclosure outside of the hide. I know he's inside, and I am not pairing it with food. I'm placing the disc in there and waiting for him to acknowledge it in some way. Either touch it, look at it, do something to indicate to me that he's aware that the target is there. And I can see him now moving around inside of his little hide. And so I am waiting for him to make some substantial step towards coming out and engaging with the target disc. And I'm going to do that before I place any food on it. So as you'll see here, he comes out and he's interacting with the target disc because he's learned to associate it with food, and he's looking for the food item. So now is when I place the food on the target disc with tongs. And at first, because this is the first time that we have ever done it this way, it startles him and he goes back inside of his hide, and that is fine. I'm just going to place the food there. And I can choose to now leave the food there, leave the room, shut the door, let him interact with the target disc as he has before. But in this case, I still saw him exhibiting curiosity inside his hide. And so I chanced it and I left the tongs on the food and I stayed present to see what he would do. Once the snake has this approximation down very solidly for several feedings, you're able to place the disc in, he comes out and interacts with it. You're able to then place the food on the target and hold it there with tongs while he comes and takes the food with you still present. Then you want to put the target on a stick or a pole and present it in the enclosure while you hold it. And hopefully the snake comes out and approaches the target, tongue flicks at it, interacts with it, and you're able to then present the food reinforcement to the snake on tongs, and he takes it. You're going to want to repeat this approximation several times because the snake is learning that he has to come out and interact with the target or touch the target in order to earn food reinforcement. And eventually, now you'll be able to use this behavior to get the snake to follow the target, move to different locations, shift, station, whatever your purpose for target training was, you will be able to build on this behavior that you've now established with your shy snake. Your snake is now used to your presence. Your snake is now not seeing you as a threat or anything to hide from. You've established some communication ability with your snake, so the snake now understands what it means when the target is presented, and the snake now understands what he or she has to do in order to earn reinforcement, and is now confident enough to do this behavior with you present. Target training has enabled you to teach your snake to interact with you in some meaningful way, and now isn't hiding all of the time when you're in the room. This fits in very well with choice-based handling because the snake is not being forced to engage in this activity and is free to leave at any time or basically say, no, I don't consent to doing this activity by just not coming out of hiding or at any point going back into his or her enclosure. For those of you who are wondering how to do these approximations, if you're not using a flat disc target like the one I showed in the video, it doesn't matter. You can use anything. If you're using a ball target, you go through the same steps. You put the ball in the enclosure, let the snake gradually habituate to it, and then eventually pair it with food. Just like you would the flat target, you just put the food next to it or in front of it if it's something like a ball. And then eventually you're going to put that ball on the end of a stick, and you're going to present the target to the snake and then present the food. You do that with any object that you might be using. So let's say that you're using a bowl for your target training. That's just fine. You eventually just need to be able to put that bowl on some kind of a target stick or pole to do your target training. And that goes for anything you're using. It could be one of these hamster tubes. It could be a cup. If you're using a cup for your target training, that's fine because that's something that's easy to set in there and pair with food either inside or just outside of the cup. But you just want to eventually be able to then put that cup on the end of a stick to use in your target training. So it doesn't matter what your actual target is as long as it's safe for the snake and that whatever you're pairing the food with initially, for example, the ball, that you're eventually able to put that on some kind of a target pole or stick.